New quarter, new guy. Thank you all for being here. I hope you're having a blessed day. We're going to be picking up where we left off last year. I know everybody can remember all the way back then, but we're going to continue what we started in the book of Revelation. Now, for those that weren't here last year, we are basing this on a book from the lectureships at Freed Hardeman from last year called The Triumph of the Lamb, The Battle with Evil in Revelation. So this is not going to be, for those, again, that weren't here, an in-depth study. We're not going to get into every bit of symbolism and all that's part of the book. But what we want to do is, what I want to do and accomplish is to show you that the book of Revelation is not this big, mysterious, I don't know what, everybody looks at it and says, we'll study anything, but no one ever wants to do Revelation because there's so much involved, and there's so many different misconceptions around the book about what it was. It's because of the symbolism that was used when it was written. It's called apocalyptic. But that word has been hijacked, and everybody talks about the apocalypse and all this, and that's not what Revelation is. Okay? The apocalyptic writing is just a revealing or a giving of a message. Okay? And really, as those who have been here know, that the book of Revelation can basically be summed up in just a couple of sentences. I know everybody goes, wow, really? All that? Yes. The book and the message of Revelation is easy. Jesus is Lord. God is in control. And we win. That's it. That's the message of Revelation to the saints in the first century when John wrote the book, and to us today. It just sums up basically a kind of a summary of the book, the Bible itself, and the salvation and the plan of God. And it's his kind of, John, through inspiration, kind of pulling together what God did for us, and again, his victory that he has already done over evil. So just real quickly, we're going to be picking up in chapter 12, if you want to be turning to Revelation chapter 12. That's where we're picking up this time. Now, as we saw last time, the book kind of goes in a cyclical type thing. You see this, it goes through this story, and then it starts again, basically telling the same story over and over again, different ways. The first chapter, when we opened up, established what? That Jesus is King. Jesus is Lord. He's the beginning, the end. That's where the verse comes from, that I am the Alpha and the Omega. Okay? That when Jesus is Lord, then Jesus speaks to several churches, the 7 churches of Asia. And really, in speaking to them, he speaks to us today and to churches today and churches all over the world. Because really, if you look at the churches in that chapter, most churches today probably fall into one of those. Okay? He pretty much covers the gambit with those churches. And telling them what he liked, what he saw they were doing that he approved of, the things they were doing he didn't, and how to come back. But every time when he told the church, I don't like this, I don't like what you're doing, this is against what I'm saying, you can come back to me though. Here's how. Okay? Even the church he said, you're neither warm nor cold, I'm spitting you out of my mouth. He still says, you can still come back to me. Just change what you're doing and come back to, today, that pattern and his will for us. And then we got into, after that, chapter 4, we got into a glimpse into the throne room of God. All right, John was taken up and Jesus gives us just a quick peek into the glory of the throne room of God and all the praise that goes around him. And even with God on the throne, who was the central, do y'all remember? Who was the central figure in that throne room besides God? Do y'all remember? It's easy. Easy answer. Christ, the Lamb, right? That was, God was there, and then the Lamb came in, and everybody praised God, and then everybody praised the Lamb. And he is where? At God's right hand, okay? We got to see the beauty as best as John could describe it to us. He used words that we could understand, but said it didn't even come close to what it was. And the main thing from that was God is sitting on his throne. This is the one we talked about earlier. God is in control. God is sitting on his throne. Jesus is at his right hand. Okay, all is good. All right, and talked about the suffering that then we got into the suffering that man was going through because of sin, because of what was brought into the world. And remember, they talked about the 4 horsemen, and we went through all that, and the destruction and the bad things that were happening on the earth. A lot of people want to put this in fact that this is coming. This is the end of times. That's not what this is. This was already happening. Okay? These things were already coming to pass. The only thing in Revelation that has not come to pass yet is Jesus coming back and taking us home and us going to heaven. That's the only thing in this book that has not transpired yet. That is probably the biggest misconception of this book, is that these are foretelling of things. This was not foretelling of things. This was trying to explain things that were going on in terms that they could understand. And using these symbolisms of the Old Testament, or that were used in the Old Testament, that's where all these come from. I wish we had time to go into relating, especially back to the book of Daniel, okay, and the prophets. You will see the exact same terminologies and the same symbolism used in both places. So at the time, this is the thing they understood. They understood these things. And using these, and you say, these are the grand things, talking about the 4 horsemen and the, fire coming down and all that. It emphasized the gravity of what he was trying to say and the things, and the seriousness of it, and the immenseness of it. But he did it in terms that they would understand. So we got into that. We began to see the sufferings of man. We got into the seals. Okay, this is one of those cycles we went through. We went through the 7 seals and how they were opened and all that, and different I'll get the words out in a minute. Different things that happened, the evil that was released upon the world and on man. All right, but what was always, you had the 7 seals. I remember what they were. There were 7 things. There were 3 of them. There were seals. There were, I know it's been a long time. Do y'all remember? There were 7 seals, 7, the next cycle, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. Okay, but as we look, they were all basically telling the same story. What was the last seal, trumpet, and bowl? What was it always? After all that stuff that was released, what was the last thing that happened? What was that last bowl? Or the last trumpet? That should be a clue. Or the last seal. It was always God coming back to judge. That after all this stuff that was going on, God was still coming back. Okay, at the end, God was going to be victorious, and that he was going to take up his people and protect them. Okay? So we saw this through different things, through all these different symbolisms through the trumpets and all that. Now, so we've gone through all this. In Revelations 11, we saw the temple and all that he was showing us, and the witnesses and so forth. We begin now at chapter 11, when we studied it, we began to see the hope. So we've gone through all this cataclysmic stuff that's supposedly happening, all the evil and the suffering that man and Christians, both man and those that are God's people, were having to endure. We still endure these today. All right? But then after we go through all that in chapter 11, we begin to see God saying, okay, hang on because there's hope. Hang on because there's hope coming. And that's where we pick up today in chapter 12. So I'm going to read through chapter 12. It's not very long, but I want to read through it. We're going to start a story here, and it's really going to go. This is another kind of the fourth cycle. All right, so he's changing gears here, and we're going to see this war that takes place. I'm sorry, daily Bible readers, could you please, daily Bible readers? So, if you will, turn to Revelation 12. We're going to read through it just real quick. And we're going to see a story. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child who is one who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil is come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Okay. The picture at the beginning here is, this is where they get the story of Michael and that, that Satan was in heaven, Satan was thrown down. And they're using that here as kind of a measure. So we want to look at this just for a second and kind of break the story down here just a little bit. When does this epic battle occur? Okay, popular opinion points to say that this is going to be the end of time, and that's not the case here, because it says, "And they have conquered the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death." That's verse 11. Who defeated the dragon? Who? Good answer. Everybody usually wants to say Michael and the angels. They fought him, but they didn't defeat him. All right. The evil one was conquered by the blood of the Lamb. All right. That's what conquered Satan. So, and throughout the New Testament, the inspired writers consistently point to the cross at the time and the place when Satan lost the war against heaven. Okay. So let's look at the cast of characters here, as we say, real quick, and see who are we talking about, these different ones. So let's start with the bad guys. All right, let's start with the bad guys. In verse 3 through 9, it describes the dragon. Okay, and he's described as a great red dragon, color of blood, signifying violence. He's kind of like a hydra, if you know what that is. He has multiple heads, making him difficult to kill. All right, that's one of the, again, this is that symbolism that's being used. Okay, 7 heads are to be exact, okay, signifying intelligence or perhaps imitation, since 7 is a divine number. We remember that, kind of talked about that, the numerology that the Jews used. Different numbers had different meanings, not just count, but had different meanings. Okay, he has 10 horns, okay. Anybody want to guess what 10 horns would represent? Power, okay. Great power. A horn was always symbolic of power. All right. If you've ever seen, if you get on Facebook and you've seen these videos of these people trying to pet the fluffy cows at Yellowstone. Okay. If you've ever seen any of those, some of them don't work out so well when the bison decides to flip them through the air about, and what does he do? Using those horns, right? And so horns were always considered to the Jews as a symbol of power. So he has great power. Okay. What would 7 crowns or diadems representing what? What does a crown usually represent? Come on, you can participate. All right, I promise. It'll be okay. All right, what does a crown usually represent? Authority. Okay? Represents authority. All right, so he's got great power. He's got great authority. All right. He's the ancient serpent, as it says there, who is called the devil and Satan. So this symbol of this dragon, there's no doubt about what it stands for. John spells it out exactly what this is. This is Satan. All right, so Satan is the main bad character here. As we all know, they usually are. Okay. Now there's 2 other bad guys. I'm just going to mention them real quick. They are in the next chapter, chapter 13, okay? And because we're going to see the story kind of play out again starting there. They are part of what I would say they're part of the crooked team, all right, Satan. So the first one is the first beast that's mentioned. If you want to look there real quick, it's chapter 13, verses 1 through 10. All right, and just real quickly, I'll tell you about them. They have 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 diadems, just like Satan does. But one of the heads seems to have a mortal wound that is healed. And again, we'll look at these more in depth probably next week. It says, John says, it seems that this beast has undergone a resurrection because, but this is really a sham. It really didn't happen. There's a preponderance of theories that surrounds the identity of this guy, but more details later on are going to point to that this beast probably represented the Roman Empire. Okay? Because what was the biggest persecution of the church during the first century? It was the Roman Empire. Okay? They were usually the ones doing most of the oppression of the church. So they really believe this first beast is representing the Roman Empire. Second beast only has 2 horns, suggesting what? This one has 7 horns, and this one has 2 horns. What is that? The 2 compared is what? Less power than Satan himself. Limited power. It says, it's going to say it appears like a lamb, but it speaks like the dragon. Okay? What would that mean to you? He looks like a lamb, but he speaks like the dragon. Deception. You remember what was the analogy that was used in the New Testament? Wolves in sheep's clothing. That's basically what we're saying here. Okay. They think it could describe the local official who enforced the emperor's worship during the reign of Domitian in 81 through 96 at this time. All right. No, I don't think so in this case. I don't think this one's it. This is what they refer to as the Antichrist. Trying to look like him? Yes. Yeah, then in that case, yes, I would say that's exactly what it's talking about. Okay, or it's one of the things it could be talking about there. All right. And so Domitian, if you've read much about him, he was one of the big oppressors of the church, and they tried to enforce. He really enforced the thing that there was no God except him. Okay, and if you didn't worship him, then you were pretty much thrown to the lions or whatever. So, but you can look that up. So that's your bad guys. Okay, they're going to be in. That's in these stories here. Now let's look at the good guys. All right. First one is a radiant woman who is pregnant, is clothed with the sun, and stands upon the moon. She wears a crown of 12 stars. All right. Anybody want to venture a guess who the woman is? Nope. It's not Mary. There are those in the other denominations that want to tell you that's what that is, but that is not Mary. And this is one of the places Catholic Church comes up with that they point to, saying that puts Mary in a reverent or in on the same level as Christ and God and all that. All right, this has been so that is misconception. Who's the woman here? Okay, yes and no. At first, at the beginning of the story, she represents. Where did Christ? What lineage did Christ come down through? What nation did Christ come through? Israel. Okay, so the beginning of this, it represents Israel. The number 12 is a common number in the Bible, symbolizing God's people. Okay, so 12 tribes. Okay, 100. Remember the number of sealed. Remember back in chapter 7 was 144,000. Okay, that's not a literal number. 144,000 is a large number divided by 12. Okay, it is represents the people of God. Okay, so what this represents is at the beginning of the story. At this point, it will represent Israel, and then when Jesus dies and comes back. It then changes to who became God's people at the cross. Church. Okay? It represents the church and the believers. Okay, at that point. Because that's who Christ, again, back to Israel, that's who Christ came down through. All right? And that was the promise. And we saw in the Old Testament that we see the lineage of Christ, that Israel, the Savior, would come through that. All right? The dragon stands before the woman as she is giving birth with the intention of devouring her baby, a male child. Okay, who is the male child she's giving birth to? Jesus. Okay, that one is correct. All right, Jesus. The details reveal that the woman, again, as I said, represents Israel, the nation that brought Jesus into the world. Okay. However, at the end of the chapter, as I said, the woman continues to be persecuted by the dragon, and he pursues the rest of her offspring. Though in verse 17, it says, those who keep commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Who is that? Hopefully us. Okay? Better be us. So he pursues us now, right? Satan is a roaring lion that roams about the earth doing what? Seeking who he can devour. All right. See how this stuff starts tying? It's amazing to me how these things in these different chapters, these different mentions, how they begin to tie together. It says here, the dragon pursues the rest of her offspring. He tried to devour the child. He couldn't do that. He went after his believers. We saw the thing that I just said back, roaring lion who seeks to whom he may devour. It worked. It all fits, people. It all fits together. All right? So in her second appearance, she can't represent Israel because Israel wasn't the focus of Roman persecution. So again, as I said, she becomes representative of the church. But there is an important continuity between old Israel and the church, which is the new Israel. And there's numerous verses that do that directly, talk about that directly. Okay, so we have the woman, which we see as beginning, it represents Israel and then represents the church and God's believers. There's the male child, okay, born of the radiant woman, as we said, that's the Messiah, okay, destined to rule the nations with a rod of iron. And if you go back and look at Psalm 2.9, that looks very familiar, okay, which describes the Messiah. Okay, this is Jesus. There's really no doubt about that one, okay. After describing his birth, John said he was caught up to God and to his throne, referring to his ascension. So Satan is sitting there waiting on him. Okay, what's he waiting for? Waiting for him to be born. All right, waiting for him to come into the world. But before Satan could defeat him, what happened? God raised him from the dead. He was raised from the dead. And what did Paul say about death at that point when Jesus was raised from the dead? Death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory? Right? Jesus had taken it from Satan. Right? Had taken the power of death. That was his power. That's what he has over us, and that's what he had over us. Okay? And without Christ, he would rule over us with that power, because, you know, what happens if there's no salvation and you die? There is no hope. Okay? But Jesus took that away from him. Took that power of death away from Satan to give us our salvation, and that's when Jesus, with his blood, defeated Satan. Okay? All right. 3, we have Michael and his angels that fight against the dragon. Michael is an important figure in apocalyptic literature. He does appear in the book of Daniel. That's where he's first mentioned. Jude calls him an archangel, which fits well with his role in the text. Okay, so we have Michael and his angels. And then we have the other children of the woman mentioned in verse 17. That's going to be us. Okay, did you know you were mentioned in the book of Revelation? Okay, the other children refers to us, the believers, individual Christians, who by adoption are fellow heirs. Okay, so that's the main characters of this story that's being played out. Okay, so there's 4 scenes, and we'll just review them real quickly here. The dragon tries to devour the child, as we talked about, but before he's able to devour him, what happened? The child is what? Snatched away, taken to where? Back up, okay, up to heaven. The woman goes where? This is verses 1 through 6. Okay, she goes to the wilderness where she's protected for, and here they use the number 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. Okay, what's important of 3.5? If you multiply 3.5 by 2, what do you get? I'm sorry, I didn't make you have to do math on Sunday morning, but you get 7. What is 7? Complete or perfect, right? So we got half of that. So what does that mean? Okay. This time period is a familiar symbol throughout apocalyptic literature, expressed sometimes in days, sometimes in months, sometimes in years, sometimes in just times. Okay. Being a half number, it symbolizes incompleteness, right? Half of 7. So 7's complete, 3.5 kind of represents, incompleteness. It's not, and therefore a time of testing and hardship. Okay, so that's what it is. But its context always includes a glimmer of hope. Okay, so that's the first scene. The woman goes to the desert or wilderness, and there is a time of trial and hardship. The child is taken to heaven, out of the grasp of away from the devil. Then scene 2, John sees war in heaven. Michael and his angels fight against the dragon and his angels. Okay, but the dragon is defeated. And he and his armies are thrown down to the earth. Okay? All right, so scene 3, Revelation 12, we're looking at verses 10 through 12 now. Okay? This interpretive section is often ignored to the detriment of the reader. Okay? They kind of gloss over this section because there's nothing exciting here, but there's a lot here to be in. A loud voice in heaven speaks. The reader learns about the arrival of 4 welcome assurances. Okay? Salvation from the forces of evil, power bringing victory for the armies of the Lord, the kingdom of our God, or the establishment of God's rule, and the authority of Christ. These are all mentioned here. The voice also explains that why the brothers, our brothers and sisters in Christ, are able to overcome the accuser. Okay? First of all, make it clear, Michael is not the one who defeated the dragon. Who did? Through Christ, through Jesus. Okay? He's the one that brought the victory. And what was it that conquered him? The blood of the Lamb. Okay? Secondly, salvation passed from those who were initially rescued to others by the word of their testimony. And finally, they were rewarded, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Okay? That was their dedication to Christ and following His commands and so forth. All right? Then we go to verse 13 through 17. Okay? The war has been won, but salvation is incomplete. Okay? It's because on the earth, the dragon persecutes the woman. With 2 wings of the great eagle, she is able to fly from the serpent into the wilderness, as we just mentioned, where she is nourished for a time, and times and half times. That's at 3.5. Another 3.5 year period. Okay? All right. And then what happens? So she's being nurtured and so forth. What does Satan do at that point? Or what does it say the serpent did? Pours water like a river out of his mouth, attempting to sweep her away with a flood. Anybody want to take a guess what that talks about? Any ideas? Think about the context here, okay? We got the woman on earth, all right, and Christ in heaven. So the serpent tries to pour out this river out of his mouth, attempting to sweep her away with a flood. What comes out of the devil's mouth? Lies. This is his usual ploy of telling lies to deceive people into disbelieving God and turning to condemnation. Okay, and you can cross-reference John 8, chapter 8, verse 44 there. Okay. What does Satan always try to do? All right. So he couldn't devour her, so what does he do? He tries to sweep her away with all his lies and deceitfulness and so forth. We see that today, people, right? We see that in the world today. All the lies and deceitfulness. God is not real. Why are you listening to Him? You're just a bunch of, whatever. And trying to turn people away from God. All right? But the earth intervenes by opening up and swallowing the river and keeping the devil from defeating her. Okay, unable to kill the woman who represents the church, the devil fiercely makes war on the rest of her offspring. Who's the rest of her offspring? Us. Okay? We must remember that Christ has been identified as the woman's male child. We already established that, okay? The rest of his children must be us, individual Christians. No matter how hard the devil tries, he cannot destroy the church. What did Jesus say when he was told Peter that at Peter's confession? The gates of Hades will not prevail against it. He was talking about the church. All right? Here it's repeated the same thing. Okay? He cannot destroy the church. Interesting thought about that, where it says the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. You can look at that as 2 things. One is the devil trying to attack the church, he will not prevail. But have you ever thought about looking at it this way? If the church goes after Satan, what's going to happen? He will not prevail. Okay? I think that was written more as an offensive than more of a defensive posture. Think about that sometimes. But either way, Satan loses. Satan's lost, however we do it. But as we go out and we're doing the Lord's work, we're getting discouraged, always remember that. No matter what happens, Satan will never prevail against the church. Okay? So real quickly, the basic thing is He is victorious over evil. Okay? We are encouraged, but individually we are surrounded by persecution. There's no doubt about that, right? I'm glad the church will, we may want to say, okay, I'm glad the church is going to be around, but what about me? All right? Well, one, we are the church. Okay? Yes, Jesus will be victorious overall, but he will be victorious not only in the church, but he's going to be victorious in our lives also. Okay? So, there are 5 means of deliverance mentioned in the text from which we can make application. Okay, this is what we can glean from this chapter. 1, we are justified by the blood of the Lamb. What does justified or justification mean? God. Well, one way to remember it is just as I had never sinned. Okay? We are justified through the blood of Christ. We stand before God justified and clean. He took our sins away through his blood, and we stand justified before God. Okay? This wonderful truth is depicted in Revelation as overcoming evil by the power of Christ. Remember then, we'll talk about wearing the white robes, right? White stands for purity and clean. All right? He promises the one who conquers will be clothed in white garments. Okay, they'll have, remember in verse 14, they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Okay, we walk in the light as he is in the light. What? His blood cleanses us from all sins. All right, it all fits. It's all the same message. 2, we believe by the word of the testimony of our brethren who have gone before us. Okay, the early Christians in Roman Empire held to the testimony despite intense persecution. All right. If it wasn't for the people that went before us, okay, where would we be today? Who taught you who taught you the truth? Think about it. Who taught you about Christ and his salvation and how to become a Christian? People that had gone before us, right? Obviously. Or some of them may be here still. Don't want to put them all out yet. But Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the gospel. All right? That's what they did. And you notice, even through 2,000 years, we're still here. All right? There's been some dark ages, some dark times. But as Jesus said, the church prevailed. And it's because of the people that went before us. All right? It's because of all those. And there will be people that, as our legacy, as we tell them, that will follow us. And it's up to us to pass that on. That's what the message is here. It's up to us to remember to not only take what we've gotten, what's been given to us, but take that and give it to those younger or others, because then they will hopefully pass that on too. And that's how one of the ways the church continues today. Number 3, Satan cannot win, not even killing those who oppose him. All right, we talked about martyrs. We looked at Stephen, the first martyr, and so forth like that. It's not Satan. Satan cannot win unless we let him. If we don't let him in, we don't follow him, we follow God, stay with him, we win. The battle's been won. It's our decision, though, whether we leave and follow and believe his lies and so forth and follow him. But always in your walk, remember that. We win. If we just stay with God, stay his children, we win. No matter what happens here, no matter what happens on this earth, we have a home in heaven. And that's where we're going. That's why Paul said, if I live, great. If I die, great. Okay? If I live, I get to tell the story more. I get to teach more. If I die, I'm with my Father in heaven. Basically is what he was saying. He said, I'm good either way. But when it's all over, I'm going to be there. So it makes what little time I'm here worth it. Okay, real quickly. Number 4, we persevere with the help of the providence of God. All right? That's just That's just a way of things, all right? That was with the woman opening its mouth. I'm sorry, the aid of the woman, the earth coming to the aid of the woman, swallowing the river, pouring out the dragon's mouth. It's hard to difficult meaning of this vision, but possibility is that the earth stands for natural order and that God has so arranged the world that his creation is protective of his people. Just one thought on that. Does God intervene on behalf of his people? Does he answer prayers? Absolutely. We may not always understand the ways of the providence of God, why he may act in one instance and refrain from acting in another, but we know that the universe is under his control. That's another thing to take with you daily. The universe is under God's control. He's in control. I know it doesn't seem like that sometimes because of the evil that's in this world, but it's there. And he's always working behind the scenes. Sometimes we don't see it for years, but sometimes have you looked back and said, that had to be him. There's no other way that couldn't be him. Okay, number 5, last one. We conquer evil by keeping the commandments of God. All right? We conquer evil by keeping the commandments of God. Obedience distinguished the offspring of the radiant woman whom the dragon went off to make war. All right? We've got to keep his commandments. Okay? If we walk with God, keep his commandments, right? We conquer evil. Because evil's not going to have anything to do with us because we're not going to let it in. We're going to resist the devil and he will flee from you. Okay? So keeping the commandments of God is how we stave off the devil. You know, were some of y'all say new converts, when you were first convert, were you expecting that, okay, now everything's going to be great? You know, there's some that did and got discouraged because they thought once they became a Christian, everything was going to be roses and unicorns, right? God never promised that. Okay? What he gave us, though, was that hope and his help and walking with him. All right? And that's how, when Satan comes calling and Satan tries to pursue us, we can resist him. All right? And you know, it seems the fact that Satan has become like a caged animal. Why do you think Satan would feel like a caged animal? He's lost, and he knows his time's coming. All right? He knows God, right? He knows God. He knows what's happened. And he knows he has a short time to take as many. He knows where he's headed, and he wants to try to take as many of us with him as he can. And God doesn't want that. God won the epic struggle against evil when Jesus died on the cross. The question is not whether Michael and his angels will prevail over the dragon and his armies. The war has already been won. The question for us is, here's the question to ponder. Which side will we be on? Those who stand with Christ and will overcome the devil and all the forces of evil. Because what did Paul say in Romans 8:31? If God is for us, who can be against us? This is a great deal. You remember? Okay, this is a great deal. We get to see the outcome, and we get to choose. Think about that. We've already seen the war's over. Which side do you want to be on now? It's usually the other way around, right? Which side do you want to be on? You hope that side wins. We know which side wins. You get to choose. So hopefully you choose wisely. But always remember, if God's for us, who can be against us? All right, thank you very much. We will pick up. If you would like, please read Revelations chapters 13 and 14 for next week.